Welcome to Hub Dialogues. I'm your host, Theo Argitis, editor-at-large for business and economics at the Hub. And on today's episode, we have a real treat. We have with us Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada, the leading voice for the nation's largest companies. As head of the BCC, Goldy has been at the forefront of conversations about competitiveness, growth, and Canada's economic future. And among the things we're going to discuss today is the new Carney government and what the country's CEOs will want or expect from the new government. Goldy, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Theo. Thanks for having me.
Mark Carney has won a strong minority government, I think it's fair to say. But he inherits an economy under real strain, and it's not just those long simmering structural problems that you and I have been discussing for years, but also the possibility of a short-term downturn as well. And you wrote a letter to him, to Mr. Carney, right after the election. And actually, I want to quote it quickly, if I may. You said you told Mr. Carney that he's taking office at a time of significant challenge and change for the country, and all Canadians are depending on him and his government to meet the moment with bold, ambitious, decisive action. Goldy, what should be the number one priority, in your opinion, for Mr. Carney in this moment?
Well, you referenced the letter, so why don't I just talk about what we asked? I mean, I think the Prime Minister himself has said that this is a crisis, and I don't think that's hyperbole. I think we are in a perfect storm in many ways. He's inherited his own mess in terms of a fiscal mess, and some of the challenges that we face, the affordability issues that so many Canadians cast their ballots on, and so forth. Are declining standing in the world for some reasons, for various reasons. Our NATO issues. These are all things that are Canadian made. The interprovincial trade barriers. There's a lot of things that we did to ourselves that he's inherited that he intends to fix from what he has said. And then we also have the fact that our largest trading partner, the country with whom we do 75% of our economies intertwined with, is going through its own change. And that is creating a lot of uncertainty in the business community. And so when I wrote to the Prime Minister on behalf of over 170 chief executives of the largest companies in this country, who are charged with the responsibility of making decisions about how to deploy other people's capital, other people's money, often money that belongs to Canadians and their pension funds or their stocks that they have invested in Canadian companies and so forth. What do they look for? Right now, what they see is uncertainty. They see tremendous uncertainty. And when that happens, capital usually contracts, it chills. You either buy shares back or you do dividends and so forth. So what is it going to take to deploy the capital? The most important thing is we have to stabilize the relationship with the United States of America. That is existential for Canada. We are not going to, for all the other things I'm going to talk about on this podcast, the Prime Minister talks about, there's not a switch there that you can just pivot. This is a long-standing relationship. Our economies intertwined, supply chains are intertwined, our relationships are intertwined culturally, politically, economically, socially. We know the nature of the relationship of what it means to be next to the G1. So that has to be stabilized. How we do that? Got a lot of thoughts about that. We can certainly pick that up after if you like, but the key is to find a path to review and extend the USMCA. It wouldn't be the first time, right? So we'll come back to that, and you can ask about how we can do that. The second thing is to strengthen Canada. We have what the world wants, as the Prime Minister has said. We just can't get it to most people. That's part of the problem. When I travel around the world, I talk about, literally, we have everything. Fisheries, agriculture, oil and gas, potash, uranium, critical minerals, electricity. The list just goes on and on and on. And what they say is, well, we'd like to buy it. But last time I heard, many countries that came to Canada to purchase some of these things were sent home packing. And we can't let that happen. And so that diversification is going to be key. And it starts with fixing some of our own issues. I mentioned interprovincial trade barriers. My father likes to say the problem in Canada is there aren't any, so we make them up. But it's akin to putting the puck in your own net. Like, this is not, I have to explain this to different ambassadors and high commissioners who say, what are these? We have a free trade agreement with you. So I like the promise about bringing them all down by July 1st on the federal side. We need the provinces to continue to bring all of theirs down. And then within that strengthen Canada piece is also diversification. I'm not suggesting that we should continue just with one. We absolutely have to diversify. Canadian companies have been all over the world, in some cases like Manulife, before Canada was even founded. We are global competitive. We're competitive globally, and we're global citizens as corporations. Let's leverage that strength. Let's work together and figure out how are we going to take advantage of our trade agreements. I think there's like 15 trade agreements with 51 countries, but we do most of it with one. So the opportunities are there, but it comes down to the execution. I see the will. I think what we need to do is do it.
Yes. So we're actually talking about an hour after Mr. Carney finished his first press conference since the election. He said at that press conference that he would be meeting with Mr. Trump on coming Tuesday. But I also sense that he was trying to downplay expectations. He didn't kind of show the urgency that you seem to be suggesting we need to have. What strategy should he be taking with him to Washington next week when he negotiates with Mr. Trump?
There's actually not a lot of daylight between what the prime minister said and what I've been saying. I don't think anywhere in that I say do it yesterday or do it now. These are actions that need to take place. But when it comes to the United States, it is going to be first and foremost about establishing a personal relationship. The president's tone towards Prime Minister Carney is significantly different than it was towards Prime Minister Trudeau. And so that represents a change in the channel and an opportunity to reset and recast this relationship. So for me, this meeting is not a be-all, end-all. There's no magic bullet. There's no coming out of it with major announceables or so forth. It's the constructive nature of that meeting, the opportunity to have a conversation where both sides listen to each other, can agree to disagree respectfully, because we're not all going to agree about the things that take place, but also identify that the status quo is not an option. You can't have a deal that we violated, that's been violated, because when the Americans put the tariffs, we put counter tariffs. Now both of us are technically in violation of the agreement that we've all signed on to. I note that Mexico has not done such a thing yet. And then you have to figure out, well, what's the path forward? How are we going to be able to get to that stabilization of this relationship that I spoke about in my letter, which is a journey. It's not a one-up. You have to get to that place over time. What I'm trying to do on behalf of Canada's business community is spend a little less time focused on the noise that comes out of Washington. Try not to get wrapped up in what the president says as much as what he doesn't say. Not be too focused on what he does, but also look at what he doesn't do. And if you look at that, Theo, one of the reasons I'm still getting decent sleep at night is really based on this. The president has never disavowed the U.S. He may have violated it, but he's never disavowed it. Right? And he has never said, I don't want a trade agreement with Canada or Mexico. He has never said, I don't want a trilateral. I want a bilateral instead. I want a bunch of bilaterals. I know he's on the record of saying, I don't like multilateral agreements, but most of the people I talk to say he's speaking about Europe at that time. Is not talking about Canada and Mexico. I think for him, getting Canada and Mexico off the table sooner rather than later is actually their plan. In fact, I'm not just thinking it, I'm being told that this is what it is. So how do you do that? You recognize first and foremost on April the 2nd, on April the 1st, when that report came out from the USTR, the issues that they identified globally, with country by country, when they came to Canada, were exactly what they told us in February they would be. The same issues as always. Dairy, the supply management issue, softwood lumber, the digital services tax, and things around IP, CRTC. There was no surprises there. Then the second day, April the 2nd, everybody else got whacked with tariffs, additional tariffs. Canada and Mexico did not. In fact, what happened was everybody that's CUSMA compliant was exempt from any further tariffs. And now yesterday or this week, they stopped stacking tariffs on top of the auto tariffs. All of these things factually speak to the opportunity to get to a table to negotiate the review and extension of the USMCA.
So, and if you look at the effective tax rate for Canada relative to other trading partners, you actually do see it's much lower than what other countries are facing. But then Mark Carney is talking about how the old relationship is over, and the relationship of deepening integration is over. What do you make of that? How do you perceive that kind of language?
Well, look, Mark Carney's comments, Prime Minister Carney's comments were made during the campaign, either his leadership campaign or his campaign. Lots of things get said in campaigns that can be seen as rhetorical. My own view is simply this. It's hard to believe that a relationship that has been cultivated over centuries, informally and informally, but certainly decades in terms of our economic relationships. And when it comes to the free trade agreement stuff, what kind of a relationship is it if 90 days, now 101 or 102 days, can completely upheaval all of that and completely destroy it? This too shall pass. It might take 25 years, it might take it, but this too shall pass. We cannot allow it to believe that just because of the uncertainty that's been created, that geography is changing. Geoeconomics is changing, geopolitics is changing, but not geography. We are where we are. And in some ways, envy of the world. People would love to have the border that we do. And so I think we have to kind of like calm that down on both sides. And to me, that's best done. I'd like to see and I wrote about this in the letter as well, is to say, why don't we invite President Sheinbaum of Mexico to come to the G7? Canada's hosting it. We're allowed to invite countries that we'd like to see here. They're in the neighborhood. They're our partner, not in one trade agreement, but in two trade agreements. Let's put an olive branch out there. The relationship was cool under Prime Minister Trudeau towards the end there. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister Carney, has an opportunity to develop a new relationship. He can be a leader of North America. Maybe the three leaders can find a little time on the side to talk about North America and then say at that meeting in June, it's only 6 weeks away, we are now instructing our trade negotiators to commence the review and extension of the USMCA. That process will take a year. Tariffs are either going to come down or they're going to be reduced or we'll eliminate the counter tariffs. Something has to give on that. So good faith is shown. But it's the talking and the dialogue and that you got to move the ball down the field. Right. And this is how it's going to happen. It's not going to happen by talking it through each other and talking past each other. It's going to happen when we put the officials in the room to do the heavy lifting of negotiating trade agreements.
Yeah. And what is like an ideal outcome for you? Would you like to see the status quo? Would you like to see even deeper integration in areas? Like what would be if you could pick an ideal outcome?
I think one of the things I want to pick up on is the word comprehensive is being used a lot, and it means different things to different people. Prime Minister uses it, and he may mean, you're talking about drugs going across the border. I want to include the guns coming up from the border. That could be his definition of comprehensive. The president's definition of comprehensive could be, I'm coming to take your critical minerals. I'd like more of your oil and gas. And, that's a different conversation. And I want you to spend way more on NATO. He's right about that. But the other things, those are Canada's assets. They belong to us. We need to ensure that we make those available to the highest paying customers, not just the one that's close by. So that's where I think we have to be careful not to go into a scenario where we're putting everything on the table, coming out with a comprehensive agreement that some may say, well, there's your economic union right there. You don't have to be a 51st state. You've done everything else. I'm not sure, given where we are, that that's in Canada's long-term interest. Frankly, I've never believed it was in our interest before all of this. What's in our interest is to leverage our assets to the full value of those assets. So now I'm delighted. I've lived long enough to see a country that the very premiers and provinces that oppose pipelines are now calling for them to be built. The campaign was a bit confusing as to whether they will get built or not get built. So for Albertans and for others in the resource industry, I think the pressure on the Prime Minister is to say, if you're going to help us diversify, you got to build us the infrastructure. So show us, don't just tell us. So he's got to find a way to navigate how to get through the United States and get that deal stabilized while also helping us diversify. And that, as I said, both things are critically important for the well-being of our economy.
Yeah, and generate investment and attract investment in the economy, particularly in the resource sector. Prime Minister Carney has expressed kind of a hope that he can move quickly on that front too. I mean, at the press conference today, he actually sounded very ambitious, talking about making big changes and making them quickly. And he obviously, during the campaign, he pledged in part to do that by streamlining regulations, that one window approval process, for example, and using perhaps the federal balance sheet to attract investment as well. I mean, what are your expectations on that front?
Well, I am a little bit more cautious about this one, partly because there was a lot of confusing messages in the campaign. Briefly, there was going to be, no Bill C-69. Then it became, we're going to keep Bill C-69. We know that the cap was being maintained. We may be able to build pipelines, but what are you going to put in the pipeline if we can't get what we need out of the ground and to be able to move it? So there's a lot of doubt about this question here. And I think we have to make sure that early out of the gate here, we not just signal, but we actually address this issue head on. Because to me, one of the sleeper issues in the country that could very easily percolate its way up is that of national unity. And it's not just about Alberta. Let me repeat that. It is not just about Alberta. There are other places in this country that may feel challenged by a prime minister who is, look, he's here to do things. He's here to do big things. I wish him well. We want the country to succeed and prosper, but we also want to keep the country whole. And we've got to work together. He's saying all the right things about the relationships with the premiers. This is a hard country to govern. You and I have covered it in different ways, and we've been around it. It's hard. And I'm hoping that we can get to a place where that consensus develops, and that we can, what I look at it in sports terms, put some points on the board, put some wins in the win column. We don't have to do everything, but if we can show that we can actually work together and do something, that'll go a long way. Because one thing I will stress to him and everybody else, and he knows this better than anybody, no legislation can make any private company deploy their capital. You cannot make me invest. You have to create the conditions for business to invest. And that's going to be the ultimate measurement is, are the policies pragmatic enough to be able to get us to where we need to go? Because historically, obviously, the Prime Minister has spent a lot of his life on the climate agenda. How do we make sure that what we've experienced for the last 10 years, which was basically climate at all costs and nothing else was really able to squeeze in, even though they had to nationalize a pipeline and approve a couple of things, we want it to be a conversation about what else can we do? Just like I said, it's the U.S. and the rest of the world. It's environment and the economy. We want to see that put into place in practice, not just in the rhetoric, if you will.
Yeah, but outside of repealing C-69, which he has said he won't, he'll keep it. I mean, what could success look like for the resource sector within the next few months?
Permitting is number one on the list here, right? I mean, everything I hear from chief executives in the country when we survey them about sort of what's the issue, without fail, no matter what's going on, it's always regulations number one, always. In fact, it's rarely ever taxes in the top five. I will tell you, there's so many other things that show up. But permitting, regulatory is the key here. If you're going to take 14 years to get access to a mine, it's not going to work, especially as the Americans are literally expediting and hurry up offense, saying, come on down, we'll do whatever you need. We can do it in a year or two or whatever the case might be. Now, that might sound like the wild, wild west, but the capital is, as I said, it's agnostic to that. It is going to go. Capital goes where it grows. And so we have to compete. We have to put some things in the window that says, look, people said we couldn't do this, and we did it. That's what we need to do. And so those projects around critical minerals are going to be key. The infrastructure around ports, for example, Theo, I mean, our ports, our airports, our railways, our bridges, we have to invest in the trade enabling architecture, the arteries of our country. And again, that's permitting, that's regulations, that's labor. We need the right people to be able to do that. We need the cooperation. So when the Prime Minister says, I'm doing one project, one review, well, if that's okay, if you're going to outsource that to the provinces, let Alberta decide what the cap should be or what their conditions are. If that's what one project, one review looks like. But that's not what we have here. We have some kind of a blended thing. And so I think what business is going to be looking for is, and recently both the energy sector CEOs as well as the bank sector CEOs have gone out there very publicly saying, look, we're prepared to do what needs to be done to invest and deploy the capital. These are the things that we need to be able to do it. And obviously, Premier Smith has been saying some additional things there that need to be addressed because she represents the people of Alberta. So to me, I want to see that engagement with our premiers. I want to see what one project, one review means. And I want to see how the response comes to the fact that, we have to compete. So the Prime Minister talks a lot about, we're going to pull you forward on the climate and we're going to do carbon border adjustments because that's what Europe's going to do. Yeah, but our number one partner is the United States of America, and they don't have that. So are we going to handicap ourselves? So we have to be very, very pragmatic. And look, I've known Mr. Carney like you have, Prime Minister Carney, for a long time. He is very pragmatic. He just needs to deliver on that now.
Yeah, but does that mean we need to temper our ambitions on climate? We need to stay a little bit closer to kind of the pace that the Americans are moving rather than the Europeans?
Yeah, see, to me, these are false choices, as I've said all along. I mean, it's not like the business community is like in denial of climate change or is not committed to the targets that they've set on 2030 and 2050. In fact, the challenge in America is they're almost under pressure to walk away from things that their shareholders covet. Remember, we work for the shareholders. We don't work for the government. And so, of course, our Canadian companies are interested in the opportunity that climate represents to address the problem, first of all. It's why we want to export LNG from Alberta to Japan, to Korea, to India, to Indonesia. I mean, not Indonesia, but India and China and all kinds of other places, because they're running coal plants. Right? So if you really believe in climate change, emissions aren't doing customs and immigration at your border. Let's bring down the emissions where they're being caused. So that's one of the ways to say you're for the climate. The other way businesses are doing is they want to be the ones investing in the innovation. Business knows that they has to be able to do both things. We have to deliver the needs of today while investing in the innovation and the priorities of tomorrow. We don't even need government money necessarily to do that. We just need good government policy that enables us to make money to be able to invest that money back in the innovation and the growth of our companies.
Yeah. We may not need to use government money, but Prime Minister Carney is indicating he is prepared to use the fiscal purse to move ahead with some key initiatives, whether it's helping to build energy infrastructure or just to accelerate the pace of the climate transition. You have been a champion of fiscal prudence, even in a letter kind of suggesting the new government should kind of be careful how it spends the fiscal purse, even with the promises it's made on tax cuts. Are you comfortable with the new government, or how comfortable are you with the new government using, government the government balance sheet to push ahead with what sounds like government that may be wanting to move very quickly?
Well, I was disappointed, and I heard a lot of disappointment in the platforms that were presented to Canadians. We've elected 6 minority governments in 8 because I don't think Canadians are being spoken to honestly about our situation. They're a smart group of people. Don't underestimate the collective wisdom of Canadians. They deserve more truth, and they deserve better on what's actually happening with our fiscal picture, where we actually are on some of the big issues of the day. And again, that was campaigning. Maybe it'll be different under governing. We have to de-risk projects. We're welcoming that. If people want to de-risk projects, let's find a way to do that. We encourage that with the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program that we were very aggressively supporting. And to the credit, Prime Minister Carney, even before this election, doubled that from 500, I think it was 500 billion to 500 million to 1 billion. That goes a long ways. You can access. It's a backstop. It's not actual money. It's just saying in the event that something doesn't materialize in a transaction that's taking place where we're providing Indigenous partners equity in that transaction, it's good to have that. So there's different ways to do this on your balance sheets as opposed to laying out the kind of cash that we did for the batteries, for example, right? And we all saw how quickly that happened. And I realized that we have to figure out how we're going to manage some of the investments in through production tax credits and so forth. But the fiscal framework is central because it is part of the confidence generating mechanism for capital to deploy. After I mentioned regulations, the second thing I hear about is actually fiscal. They say any country that's not serious about bringing down its deficit and making a dent in its debt is a country that is going to be charging more taxes. It will eventually have to charge businesses and therefore also our employees and customers more in taxes. So we want to see a fiscally responsible plan. I was disappointed that even this notion of balance that used to be so prevalent once upon a time, it seems to have completely disappeared. We should have a path to balance. If it's 10 years, tell me it's 10 years. Show me what it looks like. And what we want to see is firm fiscal anchor. It can't be a moving goalpost. With the guardrails under the previous administration moved around all the time. Tell me what it is and make sure you adhere to it, because that builds confidence to deploy the capital. And I've been very concerned that what happens if the approach that the government takes doesn't produce the outcomes that it wants. So even if it has policies that pass Parliament and are popular with Canadians, if the outcome of in getting capital to be deployed in your country with confidence is not generated, well, nothing's going to change. So this is where I'm hopeful of a genuine partnership, with business and the government, obviously with labor and Indigenous. This is not just us. Let's work together, figure out what we want to do, and let's set the path forward in how to do it in a fiscally responsible way, because otherwise we all know what happens. We all know what happens, right? One credit downgrade and the cuts start, and it cuts the things that people most covet: healthcare, education, infrastructure. So we're trying to avoid that. And the best way to do that is to have a real serious growth strategy that allows your revenues to grow as opposed to redistributing wealth that we haven't created yet, because technically today it's borrowed money.
The other big issue in the campaign, even though it was probably not as front and center as we thought it would be a few months ago, was affordability. Mr. Carney raised the issue of affordability again today at his first press conference. What does that mean for your members? How would you suggest the government think about affordability going forward and tackling the problem?
Well, look, it's not just a problem for the government. And the people that are impacted by this are our colleagues and our employees. Finding housing, finding rental properties, to be getting to work on time, navigating, the public transport systems that we have that are still in many ways antiquated. These are not problems just for government for electoral reasons, for election reasons. They're problems for citizens of Canada, and those citizens happen to be, either employees or customers of businesses. So their problems are our problems as well. Many have tried to lean in. Particularly to help identify what the issues are. Again, regulations comes to mind. When it comes to housing, right? How long it takes to get permitting to be able to do that. If you want to really bring down the cost of housing, one of my members had said once, it's literally the last name of the former finance minister. Make the land free. And then that cost was saved for the customer who's buying it. And they're already paying property taxes. They're paying all that. We have to be thinking about that. The other thing that's actually causing the delay, for example, in housing again, is the lack of labor. I know that's something some people will say, what do you mean? We've got all these people who came. Many of them are being underutilized. We're not necessarily utilizing the skills that we brought into the country from a foreign skills accreditation perspective. My members tell me they can't find plumbers, drywallers, project managers, electricians. We need those skills. We need to make sure our academic institutions are not just all about universities, but are also about the polytechnics and the colleges to help train the skills that we need to meet the demands of our workforce. That will go a long way. Wages have gone up, but people aren't feeling it because we also had inflation. And so that's part of the challenge is you got to tame inflation here, but then we're going to create inflation if we get into a tariff war with the United States of America, because at the end of the day, and again, to his full credit, the Prime Minister in London prior to the election had indicated, one of the first political leaders to say so. I've been saying it because it just happens to be true, but we can't actually have a tariff war with the United States of America. They're 10x of our economy. There are limits to what we can do. And so we've got to do everything we can to bring those tariffs down, stabilize the relationship with the Americans, grow our economy. That will allow people to build, to afford things, because part of it is the issue of the availability of things, but it's also the affordability of things, because wages are not going to go up 20% just because the house price went up 20%. So what are we going to have to do is bring down housing prices.
Yeah. And speaking about availability of resources, immigration policy has shifted over the last a year or so. Obviously, they're slowing down the number of new Canadians and temporary foreign workers coming into the country. What is the Business Council saying on the subject, advocating for?
Well, look, we have always been of the view that the economic migrant category needs to be higher. Canada needs workers. We need the people who are coming here to work for the next 30, 40 years of their life and to contribute to our tax base. That is currently at around 58 to 59%. We want that number to be as high as 65% of everybody being let into the country be more economically oriented. That's not to suggest we don't want refugees or humanitarian or temporary foreign workers or students. Those categories have been overinflated. Foreign students have been overinflated because provincial governments don't allow colleges and universities to raise their tuition. But you know what? Inflation impacts those institutions as well. They got to pay more for their work. They got more expenses for their supplies. Everything goes up, but the tuition stays capped. So you go more to your foreign student body to try and recover that. So we have to have that conversation as Canadians. What are we going to do about that question? Temporary foreign workers. Everybody talks about temporary foreign workers as if somehow big businesses are using this as a source of cheap labor. Most members, the vast majority of members don't have anything to do with temporary foreign workers, so the large companies. It's actually the SMEs that employ temporary foreign workers far, far more. And it's particularly in certain sectors like agriculture, where Canadians choose not to want to do those jobs. And it's not about pay more, it's you just don't want to do the job. So we're still going to have to be careful. So the new numbers, if I'm just trying to make a look at the note here, it's at 7.2% or something like that, down to 5% by 2027 in terms of the category. Macro level, Theo, I think there's genuine concern that one of the very unfortunate legacies of the previous government under Mr. Trudeau is the loss of consensus on the issue of immigration. We have somehow managed to get to a place where even immigrants don't want more immigrants. And that's not helpful for Canada because we have a shrinking birth rate. We're at 1.3. We have less workers working for Canadians who are working. So I don't know how that's going to happen in terms of pensions and so forth. We need skilled labor. We need people to be able to come to Canada. We have to get that consensus back. And I can assure you that we'll continue to talk responsibly about it. I was disappointed to see all the rhetoric around that Century Initiative and the 100 million. Full disclosure, I'm very much involved with it. It's actually got a very low trajectory for our population. We are going to get there, but I can understand why Canadians feel what they do because of the gridlock on in their streets, because of what they attribute to crime, because of what they're seeing in costs and affordability issues. But we've got to make sure we fix that, because in the long run, not fixing that is going to affect Canadian economic prosperity and growth, because it's very difficult to do. For all the talk about AI, that's not going to replace the work that people are going to do. We have different kind of work that needs to be done. And so I'm hoping we can get to a place where we can kind of turn the temperature and the rhetoric down on that issue and have an adult conversation about how it is that we can chart a course forward that includes an immigration policy that works for Canada and Canadians.
Yeah. And Goldy, for my last question, I mean, you and I have had quite a few conversations over the years about Canada's economy and the challenges there. It's been tough to be optimistic, in recent years. I don't think, as a country, we've kind of risen to the occasion or to meet the challenge. How optimistic are you going forward now that we have, maybe kind of a new government? Well, we do have a new government in place. Are you optimistic that maybe it's not too late? We can turn the page or start a new chapter?
I am, and I can certainly say CEOs that I've been speaking to, whether they supported the Prime Minister or not, are of the view we have a competent, capable leader of our country who understands business, who understands the economy, who has not come here for the purposes of political achievements. He's come to, as he has said, I've come to solve a crisis. I think there is hope in that, and obviously as a Canadian, we wish the Prime Minister and the government well, as we would any Prime Minister of Canada, to say we're with you, but it requires, a partnership. It requires a genuine partnership. We want to work with you. We recognize that, we've gotten away from that because of populism. I'm not of the view that it's constructive to divide and conquer Canadians. I think Canadians are smarter than that. I think labor unions are smarter than that. They know that the relationship between business and labor is central. So I'm hoping that this reconstruction of a Canadian dream, a Canadian opportunity, brings us together. The only ones getting in our way is us, Theo. And so, on the one hand, I'm extremely optimistic because I do think that we can do it. But I'm also on that other side saying, well, God, I mean, if we miss this moment, what will it take for us to seize the opportunity to truly diversify? When I'm with our American friends, what I say to them is, Canadians want to thank the president for doing what no Canadian has been able to do. He has united our country, East and West, French and English, urban and rural, and maybe even Habs and Leafs fans. I don't know. I know you're a Habs fan, and I'm definitely not a Leafs fan. But the point is, other than the hockey, Canadians are rallying around, what it means to use this moment to go somewhere with it. But they're turning to leadership, and that's my answer to your question, right? Leadership is what I have faith in. I think we have someone there now who is determined to lead the country through a crisis. We're going to have our disagreements. They're going to be respectful, but we're going to work together to advance the national interest and to make Canada strong for the reasons that the Prime Minister has been saying. If we don't do it now, if we don't get out of our way now, if we don't build the infrastructure now, if we don't get to new markets now, we will have only ourselves to blame.
Goldy Hyder, thank you for joining us on Hub Dialogues. And thanks to all of you for listening. You can find more of our coverage at thehub.ca. I'm Theo Argitis. See you next time on Hub Dialogues.